There's a blockbuster this summer. This one's it. Just mess. Terrible. Wow, we're actually love that. Welcome to the HolmFront. I am Tyler, your host, and to my right, as always, is Mitch, my overly artistic friend. Mitch,
Hi.
welcome. All right, let's just jump right into it because this movie was great.
Well, we can't actually
Oh
because
no,
we're breaking up the month. We were supposed to do a month of nothing but Stranger Things.
I guess I should address that, shouldn't I?
Yeah, sorry.
So we are taking a break from Stranger Things specifically because I thought this deserved it.
Yes.
I also found out that there's 5 weeks in July, and so I needed one extra video, and so here we are.
So this is an intermission.
Yep, it's
Stranger Things intermission.
We'll call it that. I'll put that on the thumbnail, probably not though, because this thumbnail is gonna be pretty sweet. This movie poster is awesome.
Oh yeah.
A lot of cool
It's
posters
super
on
rad.
this film. So we watched something recently, which defines, in my opinion, Summer Blockbuster pretty well. And we'll have an
Absolutely.
episode on Saturday talking about that. But what did we see?
We saw F1.
Heck yeah, we did.
It was rad.
It was.
If you
So-
didn't see it, go see it.
Agreed. Yeah.
Review
just
over. It was awesome.
Go watch it. So we had a bit of an odd viewing with this one because originally we had discussed, I was like, well, there's a couple movies out. Why don't we go see one if you got the time? And you're like, yeah, I got time. And you're like, well, I'm going to go see F1 with my parents. So let's watch the other one after.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay. So I was getting ready to find out viewings and pick up tickets and stuff. And you're like, screw it. Let's go see F1 again. I was like, you just saw it yesterday. And you're like, yeah, I know. Get IMAX. I was like, what? I was like, is there any issues with the film? He's like, yeah, the issue is that I didn't see it in IMAX. I was like, okay.
That was the issue. I had with it. I was like,
So
I
yeah,
want to see this in
another
IMAX.
recommendation: go see this in IMAX. It's worth it. So we
Yeah.
saw F1 in IMAX, which is worth it, by the way.
But if it's only playing in regular, then see it in regular. I literally could recommend this movie to basically anyone and everyone.
But-
I can't think of a single person who wouldn't have a good time in this movie. It has everything.
Yeah.
It has it all.
It's definitely catered to that summer blockbuster, like everyone will have a good time movie. But I will say my one caveat is just see it on the big screen.
Yes.
Whether it be a normal or IMAX, definitely IMAX. But whether it's see it on the big screen,
Mm-hmm.
regardless. So yeah, high octane, a lot of fun. We're gonna have an episode on Saturday talking about how it fits within the summer blockbuster criteria and like what all that is. But we'll talk about today just specifically the film
Yeah.
and what made it work and what we enjoyed about it.
So we should probably give a brief synopsis, but I don't think we need to go too deep into it. I will say though, like when basically every movie is a remake or a sequel, it's really refreshing to just see the only original movie.
It's
playing.
about 95, I think, percent of all the films that are out right now. The prevalent ones are either remakes or sequels, and I didn't realize that until you pointed it out. We were having lunch
Yeah.
afterwards, and I was like, "You're right." I looked at him. I was like, "Yeah, this is all remakes and sequels. This is nothing else." So this is
Yeah.
one of the big originals, but also fits in that credit. He plays on this interesting idea of using something familiar to pull in a bigger crowd.
Okay.
F1
Yeah.
being the thing. Because Top Gun is his other film, and Top Gun is obviously a sequel, but he makes that also a summer blockbuster. It's a big
Yeah.
explosive film that's very accessible. But F1 is something a lot of people are going to recognize,
Mm-hmm.
and also racing as a concept is exciting.
Yeah.
So
I
you
mean,
have
sports
enough
film,
there.
Pretty easy.
But yeah, as a concept, like this isn't something that's been made before. Not like as F1, I guess, and it's not a sequel to anything. So it's just its own standalone thing. And then he has the star power of like Brad Pitt to pull it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he did all the right things for the marketing, but then brought the original film as like peak summer blockbuster.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, just to like recap, I mean, everything in the theater is Jurassic World again, 28 days later. And so it's like remakes, sequels. What's
think-
Lilo and Stitch, live
Remake.
action remake. How to Train Your Dragon, live action remake.
There is Elio that I think is the one original Pixar film that's out, but it's not doing too great. It's not standing out amongst the rest.
So at least there's 2, but like you said, it's like
Mission
95%.
Impossible was the other one.
That's a sequel as well.
That is a sequel
Yeah,
as
so
well.
it's like you go to the theater, and I have no problems with sequels. I have no problems with remakes, but also like when that's all there is at the theater, I'm just like, man,
you're a lot more inclined to try something that's new.
Yeah, it felt good to just sit down and be like, I don't know what I'm gonna get. I just know I'm gonna get a cool racing movie. That's all I really need to know. And I got so much more from it, though.
Yes.
I really came away from this movie being like, wow, that was like what's his name, like Joseph Kosinski or something, the director.
I think. Yeah.
Kosinski, yeah. He's proved himself now, because I went into this movie the same way I went into Top Gun Maverick, where I was like, all right, I mean, action. I didn't really care for the original that much. Sorry. But I came out of Top Gun Maverick being like, wow, I really enjoyed myself. That was fun. That was really engaging. And this one was the same way. I was like, all right, he's doing his same kind of thing. It's just going to be exciting stuff. And then afterwards being like, I was really invested in the main character. Like Brad Pitt really, it was like he did such a great job of communicating so much nuance with him that.
Yeah, he added just a good amount of spice of drama.
Yeah.
And made it. Like, what little room he had, he added a lot of depth that I think was good enough to be like, okay, I'm not going to overstay my welcome, but we need a little bit of something in here.
Yeah.
He did a great job. And that was, so as a synopsis, it is the classic, like, has been, or in the movie as they reference him, the never was. That's like not quite in retirement, but not really wanting to make a big name for himself, that gets dragged out, and he wants to help his friend.
A once-in-a-lifetime chance to compete in Formula One racing. I mean, come on. Like, you don't need a complicated setup here.
No. And that's, and at a certain point, it's an interesting question to be like, how complicated do you need to make it?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, not very. But it doesn't matter, because that's going to resonate with people, right? That's that artistic thing, is what's going to resonate on a human level. And there's a reason why some of these stories have done so well, even though so many of them are, for lack of a better term, formulaic. But so he gets pulled out of retirement to get back into this, has a second shot at what he wanted to do originally. And then you have the dichotomy between him and his co-star. So obviously there's like a, I guess, rivalry type thing there. There's the old versus the new. So he's got all the classic elements to make it in. And then the rest of the film is just racing and, winning So this one doesn't rely on having them compete against someone else. So it's not like a Rocky thing where he's competing against Apollo Creed.
Yeah.
So there's not a clear antagonist necessarily. It's just the other racers on there. So, and that's another thing he did really well, was making sure that he didn't like try and put too much in there. Like, he knew what you were invested in, and that's the drama between the two co-stars.
Yeah.
And that's all you needed for the film. The rest of it can be handled on its own. Like, you're gonna, what you're getting with a race. You don't need to put a face to any of the other racers.
Yeah, it doesn't really get involved with any of them. But what is interesting is that, so you're following the two of them. They're on the same team, but it's like you get two racers and for your side, basically. So that way, if one of you loses, the other can pull ahead.
Right.
And that made
there's a surprising amount of strategy too that I didn't know about F1. That was a lot of fun to learn. But he did that as well, was helping like lead you in to all these nuances that most F1 fans will know, but people like us who don't pay attention to that stuff are not going to know.
Right.
But he also didn't like over explain everything. He's like, you know what a race is. Like, I'll give you some of the details to help you understand the strategy, and that's all you need.
Yeah, so like as you're seeing them resolve their conflicts, or seeing their conflicts play out, the old versus new on the track, you also like you say, get to learn about F1 racing. But in that is also like good opportunities for character development, or like character portrayal, which was really clever. So instead of just being like, all right, well, now here's our action racing sequence, the stuff that like Brad Pitt's character will do, because he doesn't tell anybody what his plan is.
Yeah.
He's just like this wild card. So you're watching him, and like my favorite is when he's like driving a race, and then he goes for a pit stop, and then as he's coming in, he's like, give me these specific tires. This is the one I want to use now. And they're like, no, that's a stupid plan. We're giving you these other tires. And he's like, no, give me the good ones. And they're like, okay, whatever. But then they're just like, just give him the stuff that we think he should have, right? So he pulls into the pit stop, and then he's like, what are you doing? And they put on the tires he doesn't want, and then he just sits there.
Yeah, he doesn't leave. Because it's supposed to be a snappy process. It's like a 2-second turnaround. So they're supposed to get the tires on, he leaves. But he just sits there and he waits. And they're like, what are you doing? He's like, I asked for those tires, so put them on. So he's just, And they're obviously stressing because every second counts in these races.
Right.
And so he's just
And
like,
they
I'm
get
going to
so
waste
pissed.
as much time as you want. Just like, give me what I want.
And then the guy in charge, he like gets so mad. And then at some point he just stops and it's like, I guess my hissy fit's over. Just
Yep.
give him the tires
I'm
he
gonna
wants
lose
because
this
it's
battle.
better that he drives than just sit here in the pit stop. So get him out.
Which is another thing that's semi-formulaic because you have the like wild card.
Mhm.
But it adds an element of interest because no one knows what he's going to do next.
Mhm.
And so it's just naturally going to be like edge of your seat because you're like, well, I don't know what he's going to do either. Like, what am I
It's
going to
just-
get? But
Yeah.
you always know you're going to get something satisfying. And he does. He delivers
Mhm.
on that. And so just his knowledge, obviously did a lot of research on F1 Formula racing.
Yeah, you feel it.
And he probably had some team in there that was like, no, you would want to do it this way. Or you can clearly tell that a research has been put into making sure that everyone's going to understand what's going on, but also like it's going to appeal to what actually happens in these races.
Yeah.
And it really shines through. It's great. It's nice.
It's super realistic. There was a moment in the movie where they're on the track and like there's a whole crowd of people in the audience, and it's not a flashy scene. He just meets with like some board of the sponsorship.
Yeah.
But when that happened, that was the moment for me where I went, wow, I just feel like everything I'm seeing is real. I don't think any of this is fake. Like maybe
For all
it
we
was.
know, it probably was. They were probably on some real track during some real race.
Yeah.
And they were just like, let's just get a bunch of B footage and just have them go around. I mean, everyone's going to be happy seeing Brad Pitt driving around the track anyway. So, like,
Right.
win-win for everybody.
Exactly.
But these are those filmmaking techniques. Like Peter Jackson, for instance, went to a football stadium because that was where he was going to get all this sound, and he just dictated what they were going to say, and that's what they used for when Saruman's talking to the
and it's the
horde.
orcs, like
and
chanting or whatever.
he's like, where else are you going to get that kind of a sound?
Mhm.
So you just go to where it's already existing.
Mhm.
So they probably did the same thing because I think Formula One was probably sponsoring this movie because like it's just advertising for them. Like if you get the guy who made Maverick, Brad Pitt, and the movie called F1, and it's a summer blockbuster, you're gonna get a whole bunch of butts and seats that are gonna gain interest in F1. So like they probably were like, yeah, you can use some of the tracks, jump in a couple of cars, why not?
Yeah, I know at least one of the producers is a Formula One racer.
Okay.
Which was cool. And also, he has like a brief cameo in the movie.
He's like the one face they put to one of the other
Yeah.
drivers.
I
and
didn't know
it's
who he
funny.
was. I was like, this is some random racer, but
He's
like,
he's real.
like professional. He's like one, like more than anybody else or something like
That's
that.
awesome.
He's just like some crazy good Formula One racer.
I imagine that would be. He's like, yeah, put me in a movie with Brad Pitt, and Brad Pitt's like, yeah, put me in a movie with the F1 driver.
Yeah, exactly. Just like this is
and it's funny because
win-win.
like it's such a minor part. He doesn't need
Yeah.
to play it up, but it is one of those that like, yeah, I'm coming after you or whatever.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
something
yeah.
super small and minor, but whatever. Put a face to it, so it was investment enough to like not really pause the movie, but make it exciting because they gave another driver a face.
Yeah.
And enough people that have watched F1 will recognize him. Oh, that's whoever.
Yeah.
We don't know anything, so it didn't help us, but still fun. Yeah. Okay, so synopsis out of the way. I will say as a secondary point, everything in this movie works. There's not an ounce of fat on this thing. He knows precisely where to slow down, where to speed up, what to keep in this film.
Slow down, speed up.
Haha, I'm trying to use all the terms.
Oh, so this is deliberate.
It was
Okay.
deliberate, yeah. I'm somewhat clever sometimes.
I was like, that sounds like something I would have said, and then you would have critiqued me for.
I'm critiquing myself in my head. I'm
Okay.
very disappointed in myself. But yeah, so it's very much like he doesn't overstay his welcome at any of those points. It's very exciting, very accessible, obviously, because we typically like our slower, more intellectual films. So summer blockbusters, they're fun for a minute, but they're not something we would revisit. But this movie, for instance, you wanted to jump right back in the next day.
Yeah, I'm glad I did. I had a great time. It was just as much fun the second time.
Yes, I would imagine so. I would probably go watch this today.
Heck, well, let me know when.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it, I was looking at some critic reviews, and one of them was commenting like, "Oh, there's just like so much exposition." I was like,
Was there? I guess if you know Formula One, maybe.
that was the only thing I could think of, is because when they're racing, the announcers are explaining some of the things that are happening, like the strategy or what.
I thought that
it's
was veiled
looking-
enough. I feel like you would get that if you're watching a Formula.
You would. You absolutely would.
Yeah,
but
they
it
have
was.
announcers.
It was maybe too much for that person, but I also think it was I noticed it the second time, they only talk about, like, Brad Pitt and his co-star. They don't talk about any other racers, but also, like,
You are catering to your audience of the film.
yeah, it's kinda like from the perspective of you being a driver like these
Or
characters,
you being an audience member that's watching it, because you
and
would
you're
only care
following your
about
team
that.
that you
Yeah,
care about.
right.
Exactly. Yeah, so
Didn't
and
stand
they're
out to
the
me.
underdogs, so that's, makes it more interesting for you, so
Right. Yeah, well,
yeah, I thought it
also,
worked. I thought it was very much veiled, and it worked seamlessly. I
yeah,
appreciated having them there because you said it too. You were like, I actually don't know a lot about Formula One. This is kind of nice to just, and also like to have them fill in, but also like create more of that vibe of this is what you would hear if you were there. So kind of simulate that experience of going to a Formula One race, but then also great character drama is happening beneath the
right.
surface, and you get that too. So it's like perfect as like a cinematic experience.
I'd also say he had a justification that exists in the movie, because Brad Pitt's character is coming. He was a Formula One racer. He was a racer back in like the 80s or something from the film's perspective,
Hmm.
and then he's coming back, and so he would be the object of a lot of interest because of that. And so they're talking about his history. They're talking about how what kind of a driver he is, what made him famous originally, what he's bringing back that made him famous, and how he's changing, and how he's being molded by his co-star, and vice versa. So all that would be objects of interest with announcers, in my opinion. I mean, again, I don't watch a lot of these races, so maybe I'm wrong, but
Mm.
also the editor and the director are catering that so that, like, you don't want to know about everybody else. You don't care about, like, you're there for the drama between those two. So you
Right,
don't
right.
want the announcer's full commentary. You're just catering it to the audience of the film.
Yeah, like how much bloat can you put into it
Right.
before it's just distracting from the stuff that's rich that we're really enjoying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's the director's knowledge of making sure that he's making that substantive, and not, he's not putting a whole lot of fat into it. Like I said, there's not a lot of fat. Like, you're not getting a whole lot of extraneous information. So
Mhm.
that, I think, plays into it. By the way, Brad Pitt is coming back. He's not had like an overlong, break or anything, but this is one of those films that really like shot straight up to the top, and
Yeah.
he's really bringing his star power into it. He's obviously one of the selling points of the movie, but he really delivered regardless.
Yeah, he did great. I mean, it's for a character role where you just have so few sparse scenes and they're not very
Right.
long. He really adds just a huge amount of depth to this person. And the thing is his character isn't necessarily like he doesn't have some deep tragic backstory. He just had,
It's
he's
enough.
yeah, exactly. But like also, you know, it's meaningful enough to him and then we get invested in that drama.
Yeah.
Like he has a moment where, he goes through a wreck and then he gets injured and it's like he gets knocked down way harder than he expected. And that kind of like
Puts him
killed.
out for 30 years or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that's a long time. So just, you thinking it into that, I mean, it's very easy to kind of project your own like ambitions or things that you've gone through in life. And I kind of wonder if that's like a unique skill, right? To be able to have a movie, it's exciting, it's exhilarating, you're engaged with all of that. The sensory experience is so good. But then the by keeping it just enough with the character drama, it allows the viewer to project more, and that's part of the intent. As
Mm.
opposed to saying like, well, let's like unearth them for all he's worth, like the
Let's really
super
delve
deep
deep.
character study.
Doesn't
Yeah.
need to be.
Yeah, but I mean, not even just that it doesn't need to be, just the fact that it actually would be then become a problem because then you would constantly see it as this character, not
Right.
me. Whereas like now you can kind of start doing more application to yourself, I felt. So it's kind of like it paves more of an opening. And yeah, I think that works really well.
It did. Yes, it did. Like I said, would recommend the movie because of that. Yeah, and that provided all those avenues for the character drama. But it also gave that good contrast between him and his co-star. So the co-star's name in the movie is JP. I always forget the actor's name. So we'll just say Brad Pitt and JP, I guess.
Yeah, may as
So I
well.
can't remember Brad Pitt's name from the movie.
Yeah.
But JP is the other driver, and he's the like hot shot, new up and coming, but not matured, so rough around the edges.
Hmm.
So you have that like classic dichotomy between the two, and so that's they're like exploring their turf, and kind of, I don't know, they're both cocksure, and they both have their way of doing it, and they both think it's right. So there's that instant rivalry that comes from it. But Brad Pitt's brought on specifically to temper JP's character, but also, he has to temper his own character in order to work as a team player because he's the lone wolf that comes on. And so they both have their development that's interesting to see. And they do that interesting point that you brought up was that Brad Pitt gets up every morning. And so he's had this discipline that's instilled over time and maturity. He'll get up really early, get there before everybody else does, and he runs the track. And so he, as you said, touches grass. He gets out. And he actually gets boots in the ground and runs, and then they show JP. And this is something I think that probably is Rocky inspired because they do that in Rocky 4. He's the hardcore get out in the snow and run and get in the barn and throw stuff around, and then his rivalry is he's got all the scientific equipment, so they pick him up to everything
a machine, and he's running on a treadmill. He's got a breathing mask.
Exactly. So they're making sure that he is they've got everything monitored, his heart rate and his breathing patterns. Same thing
checking
with
his blood.
Yeah, JP is doing the same thing. He's checking his blood. He's on that. He's he's getting peak physical performance, but also he's driving and stuff. And Brad Pitt's just getting out and running every morning.
Yeah, he just goes out for his morning jog.
It's a solitary experience, but he's getting the same results. And so there's a dichotomy where JP sees him doing that, and he's almost criticizing it. But Brad Pitt also doesn't want to be part of the team, so he's just running alone. And then eventually he starts to bring people on. It starts to be like a Forrest Gump thing where people start joining him. And then they're all running around, and it becomes a competition. Last one pays for breakfast or something. So all of the team members, like the pit crew and all of them, start to join him, and JP doesn't. And then JP goes through a similar experience of his crash.
Yeah.
So he has his low point of the film, and he has to spend a couple of months in the hospital or whatever, recovering some burns and such. And then when he comes back, he's kind of bitter about it. Doesn't like that now. Brad Pitt's character has stolen the spotlight from him. He was that hot shot, and so now, he's losing the limelight. And so he comes back in kind of hot, and at the expense of Brad Pitt, he pushes him off the track, in order to regain his place in the spotlight. And by doing so, creates that rivalry. So they reach a peak, and then to eliminate that rivalry, they start to he starts to go back out on the track, and he starts to run the track. Yeah. And so they kind of reverse the roles, because Brad Pitt starts to phase out because he knows once this is over, I'm probably not going to stay in this world. This isn't my world.
Yeah.
But JP starts to become the leader of the team, and they do that interestingly through a card scene that they play. So one of the characters notices that they are just they're butting heads too much.
You got to. I'm going to cut you off there because.
Sorry, go ahead.
One of the parts about that whole touch grass moment that I really love so much kind of gets in, because it'll be weird if I try to loop it back in later.
Sorry,
so
go ahead.
I'll let you have your card scene in a moment.
Right.
So the thing that is, I think, thematically interesting about that is because I didn't catch it the first time. It was just JP's doing his montage workout, his recovery workout scenario. That's basically what it was. But then I stopped the second time, and I was like, he's actually running around in the woods and just kind of in the same place that
with this guy on the scooter following behind him.
yeah exactly. And I'm like, and JP as a character, he loves the spotlight, and he's smile for the fans or whatever. And Brad Pitt's character doesn't care about any of that. He's just like, what are you smiling about? We lost. Why
you got 10th? What's that? Nothing to celebrate.
Yeah, that's lame. We're here to race, and if you want to race, you want to try to win.
Right.
So your mind should be on the track. So the fact that he kind of goes into that grounded sensation is part of the infectious personality that Pitt's character has, because he's got this spiritual undertone to him. Anytime he starts a race, you'll just see him pause, and he closes his eyes, and he just kind of waits for a moment, and then he gets up and gets in the car. And they never address whether or not he's a spiritual person or what he believes in. But again, that's the benefit of not having this depth of character, and instead just being this guy's tapping into something that's really working for him.
Sure.
And everybody around him on the team is noticing. And so they want to go on a run with him because they're like, I don't know what it is, but you're living a life that's really cool.
Something's working. Let me get in on that.
Yeah, let me get in on some of that.
And the thing is, they don't even say that it's praying necessarily. For all we know, it could just be his moment of silence or something. He's just It's kind of like when someone bows before they enter a dojo or something. It's just his ritual. And they show part of the ritual. He puts a card in his pocket. He takes his watch off.
Yeah.
So he's not bound by time, and he's got this wild card thing going on, and then he bows before the car, so he
Yep.
sits there and takes a moment, and then he gets in.
Right.
So but they don't explain why he does it. They don't really care,
Doesn't matter.
and to them it's like, well, we may have a reason, but it's really just like this is what you as an audience member is going to see.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're watching
Right.
the Formula One race or whatever, you're going to see him do this ritual every time. Same thing with like a baseball player. You'll see him do his ritual before he goes up to bat or whatever.
Right.
You're just going to see this thing. You might not understand why, but it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You just know that this is an aspect of this character.
Right.
And so that's all that you need to garner interest. It doesn't have to have a reason.
Yeah, exactly. But what a cool way to like just depict a character who's like self-actualized.
Sure.
That's what I was coming away with. I was like, wow, this character, he just defies so many of the things. It's not just the race of conventions of what they want him to do. It's also like the way they want him to participate in their strategy that they've figured out. It's also in that they want him to do like interviews with the press or whatever. And he's just like sitting there like, okay, sure. Like, and whenever people like are confrontational with him, he just kind of gives them what they want. He's like, well, you've already decided what you want to hear, so sure. And then
there's that one
on.
scene where the guy's like, you've been through 2 ex-marriages and you haven't been racing professionally for a long time. He's like, do you have any regrets? He goes, yep. That's all he gives him. He's just like, what?
He's
just
just
of course I do. Like, I'm not going to expound on that. We're talking about racing here. I want to get in the car and race. This is garbage. Like, why do you care about my personal life?
Yeah, he's like, why would I? It's like, and like, what a stupid question to ask. Like, do you have any regrets? He's like, of course I have regrets. Like, how does anybody go through life without regrets? And that like humanized him, so he wasn't this enlightened individual. He was just like, no, there was mistakes there, but those mistakes
don't matter to this particular scenario.
Yeah, and they've also helped shape me into coming into the like identity that I've now formed for myself. So I know what to do for how I feel best as a racer, and that's my skill set, and that's what I accommodate. All this other stuff is just, as he puts it, just white noise.
Right.
And no one else is like really they're just like, oh, let's nitpicky and get all this stuff.
Right.
And he's like, not what it's about. So who cares?
And that's where one of the resolutions they find too is that JP cares so much. And so he's constantly on his phone. He's constantly checking the updates, constantly checking what people think. And that was one of the things where Brad Pitt's like, why do you care, man? It doesn't matter. Like, your job is to get in a race and win. Why do you care what people think about you? Like, you're either succeeding or you're not succeeding. So,
and it's like, that's what your passion should be at.
Right.
So you're wasting all your time. And that's kind of what I meant. Like, is like, I don't want to call it just a small message about like pulling back, like the movie is just saying like kind of a rejection of social media and followers and the whole like noisy world that we live in today. It was strange that it's like this technical sport where they're driving in these, insanely designed cars with just so much thought and nuance put into them, and the drivers are just really skilled at handling them. But then like there's this underlining theme that I think everybody could get on board of, like unplugging in a weird way.
Sure.
Right?
Well, that was the end scene where it's talking about flying, where he just kind of like gets into the feeling of the track, where it just becomes natural. But that's that human element of being able to, I don't know, connect with the car or whatever the message of that was. But it's just like, this is now you're just relying on instinct rather than how, and that's the thing they were dealing with JP when he's like, he's all connected up and he's running on the treadmill and everyone's like monitoring all of his stats and stuff.
Yeah.
At what point does that become a distraction rather than an improvement?
Right.
Because all these things are supposed to be tools, right? Social media is supposed to help garner interest, and like you're supposed to be in peak physical shape and you're supposed to be practicing. But at a certain point, like you do have to just get out and do it.
Right.
Because all this stuff just becomes just too distracting at a certain point that you get so caught up in being perfect that eventually you don't use it for anything.
And then it starts to bleed over into your attitude about the thing that you love.
Right.
And then it starts to make that thing you love just kind of detestable.
Right.
And it's like,
it's too much work at that point. All work and no play. It's, I guess a way to put that.
Yeah.
So that was where they resolved that difference, because that is their point of contention, is that JP is all invested and Brad Pitt's not, and it's affecting JP's image. And so part of I know, unbelievable. So
what will the public think?
There's one of the characters that is Brad Pitt's love interest, the like real subplot, like real tiny subplot of the film.
Mm-hmm.
She sits them both down and they have to play poker.
Well, she designs the car.
Yeah.
And so
She's
she's
part of the
works with
team.
them, closely to figure
Yep.
out what their experience is like. And yeah, she sets up this poker game to try to get them to settle their differences
Yeah,
in
because
this
she
really
knows
funny scene.
everything's getting too hot behind the scenes, so we've got to find some way to resolve this.
Yeah, so tell me about the card scene. What did you want to say about
So
that?
she sets it up where she's like, all right, we're gonna play poker, and whoever wins gets to decide the leader of the next run. Because there's one person calling the shots. Typically, it's been Brad Pitt, but obviously JP's back, so he wants to be
Top
back at
dog.
the forefront now. And so she's like, look, which if whoever wins gets to call it, and if I win, I'm the one that gets to call it. I get to pick, and you guys have to deal.
Mm-hmm.
So they go through this discussion where she asks a couple questions, like when do both of your dads die, and they both at the same age of when the dads died.
Mm-hmm.
They're both 17 when that happened.
I
And
thought
they
it was
find
13.
I think they said 17.
I think it's 13. I saw it twice.
Whatever. I'm probably right, but sure. So they go through that. They find a couple other nuances, but that's another thing is that JP is checking his phone consistently, and that's when Brad Pitt confronts him about it and was like, it's all white noise, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is why I act the way I act in these press conferences and stuff, because it doesn't matter. You're going to get distracted, and it's going to start to affect you, and it's going to start to affect your performance on the field, on the track. He's like, that's not what you're obviously talented. You know what you're doing on the track. Just use that. Like, reach into that talent. And so JP kind of takes that, and he's like, oh, this guy isn't just an a-hole. Like, he actually does care.
Yeah.
And he is interested in this, but also it was tempering Brad Pitt's character because they have another moment like that, and she's asking what the difference is between them. She's like, what's your problem with JP? He was like, he's too hot-headed. He cares too much about the limelight. And then she asked JP, what's Brad Pitt's problem? He's like, he doesn't listen to anything. And Brad Pitt, he's like looking at his cards or something, and she looks over at him. He goes, what? They're like playing into it. So they both have valid complaints about the other.
Yeah.
And by the end of the conversation, they've had it. But Brad Pitt is quicker to learn.
Yeah.
And that was something. So I predicted the end of the film because of that scene.
Spoilers for the end of the film, I guess.
I guess. I won't give it away necessarily, but
even if you have spoilers, it doesn't ruin the movie.
No, it doesn't.
Not for this kind of movie.
You can kind of see it coming, I guess. But I thought it was interesting because they play a hand, and JP goes all in, and Brad Pitt also goes all in, and then obviously the female character, I can't remember her name, but she also pushes. She's like, I guess we're all just doing this at this point.
Yeah.
But she doesn't play her hand at all
because
it's not important anymore. She's already resolved what she needed to resolve. She's like, I've got them talking. She's like, I've noticed there's change. We've got progress. That's all I wanted. So we're here. But what's interesting is that JP, being the hot shot, shows his hand. So he puts down a pair of fives. And Brad Pitt folds. And so when he folded, I was like, oh, he won.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
I called that too.
So he let JP think that he won because he learned something from this conversation. And he's going to let JP stew on it. He has to let that marinate. So he has to let him win in order for that to happen. Because if he takes that win from him, JP's he's going to be upset about it. It's not going to settle in properly. But also, he's showing that now he's listening, that he's paying attention, and that he's giving it to him. So he gives him the lead.
Gotcha.
But also, through that, he wins. Because he has changed. He's figured out, but he also actually won.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. So I got the end of the movie. Cool.
Oh, that is interesting. So I predicted as well when I saw it, like, I was like, oh no. I was like, he didn't reveal his cards, so he clearly did win.
Yep.
But then I took it as a different message.
Okay.
I kind of went with I think yours is probably more accurate though and really valid. I'm like, that's really interesting. I just kind of took it as like, well, all right, you can win this stupid poker game. I don't really care. Now I'm just going to talk with this woman who's super interesting and engaging, and I'm just going to spend the evening with her. And that's more important to me now.
Right. That's
than
fair.
This poker game.
Because that does also happen, but I think he was more thoughtful than that, for sure.
I think so, too.
Because he knew that what she was trying to do, so he gets brownie points with her. But also, I think he did actually understand. He's like, okay, this is now where I pass over the leadership. I understand that he has now reached a point where he's heard what I had to say, so I'm going to let him take it over from here. Because he's young enough that he's got to come to that conclusion himself. I can no longer push any further. So I'll let him think that he won. He'll figure it out later. I know he will. He's not stupid enough. Like, I made a living off of gambling. Like, I know he's going to figure it out later. And so,
Yeah, exactly.
so he gets, because then she pulls up a line. She's like, oh, well, I'm only interested in winners or something. Like, it's not that shallow. She actually puts it off pretty well.
Yeah.
And then that's when he shows his cards. And so then she understands that he gave him that win. And so there
Yeah.
was more layers to it. And that makes him more
Mhm.
interesting now. So that was when they have their romance subplot.
Yeah. I also thought too though it's kind of like a generational moment too
Yes.
where he's like I don't need to win a game. Like
Right.
it's not as important when you're older and you've kind of been through life. It's just like I mean the same thing like I was just talking with one of my students and I have my students play a board game with me first week for like an hour or
Nice
something.
icebreaker.
Yeah, as an
Mhm.
icebreaker, but also because at least at the school where I teach, like they really need just a moment to kind of like center and recognize, hey, this is your because they share classes together for like 2 years. So I'm
Yeah.
like, this is your cohort. Try to learn each other's names and try to see each other in a new light, right?
Sure.
That's what the purpose of the exercise is for. But the funny thing was, is I every now and then I'll get a student who's like, that was a really fun game, and then they go get it and they show their friends,
Okay.
and they usually report back saying how um, oh, like some people liked it, but then there's always the people who get frustrated and they just want to win and they're obsessed with this winning
Sure.
thing. And I was very much like that when I started playing board games too, or any games. I think that happens to most of us, or a lot of us,
Of
anyways.
course.
And what happens is, I think after you've won a good amount, you start to like, okay, I need to let this go. This is not actually that important. So it's easier for Pitt's character to be like, like he's like you said, he sees the layers and goes, well, here's the most important thing.
Sure.
So let's just elevate that. And then if I have to take a loss in order for that to happen, I'm okay with that. And you can even see him on the track doing things like that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, I lose so that you win. That works. Like
Right.
as long as we can satisfy the objective, then we have an option here. And JP is just like, yeah, that was awesome. I win. And then,
But then he
off.
realizes what the strategy means, and yeah, it's about the team and not about him necessarily. And by that, I mean he does end up getting someone offers him a position or something because he is a talented enough driver. It's not about the
Yeah.
fact that you were number one on the track. It's the fact that like you've solidified your legacy as a driver now,
Mm-hmm.
and that happens through being a team and also a singular driver,
Mm-hmm.
and that happens over the film. But so yeah, so they kind of like there's this kind of shift that happens in the movie between the two characters where
Mm-hmm.
JP starts to realize, oh, this is why Brad Pitt's doing this stuff, and then Brad Pitt is tempered because of all that, like
Yeah.
learning to be a team player and learning how to give up enough in order to find satisfaction and being on that team and
Mm-hmm.
being able to be an impact in someone else's life that it has similar aspirations to what he had as a child and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like I said, there's a surprising amount of depth
Yeah.
within the drama of the movie.
Yeah. Even the passing of the torch element where
Yeah.
where JP starts emulating the same leadership things that Pitt's character was doing. And it's just kind of a cool moment where like the younger generation is just like railing on the older generation, they don't know anything without really recognizing
Yeah.
that there's a lot of wisdom that comes with that. But then when you do look at the older character, he's actually the more of the hot shot in some sense because he's
Yes.
such a rebel. But he's not being a rebel maliciously. He's just a rebel because he's like, I've figured out what my best, most efficient like role, my way to do this. And so you guys are gonna have to acclimate to that on some level.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be your friend and to back you up. And it's like, hey, like there's this subplot, a really small one, where one of the girls working on the like where she swaps out the tires, she makes a mistake early on, and he's like, don't worry about it or whatever afterwards. And then she like sees him later and she's like, hey, appreciate what you said, but don't say it again because it just makes me seem like I'm a failure who can't defend myself. And he's like, you're right. I gotcha. No problem. But it was just like such an honest exchange of just him being like, I'm here to back up the team. Like, no one should go away from the race with hard feelings.
Sure.
But also like I can respect individual boundaries. If she doesn't want me to say too much because that interferes with her life path of getting good at this,
Sure.
then I can do that. I can respect that. Because that's what he does, right? He's like, I've kind of reached that point where I'm really satisfied with how I've gotten here. And so, like, I wouldn't want someone telling me, like, this or that about my performance as a driver. It's just not.
Well, that one was interesting because she makes the mistake, and then she's called out in front of everybody by JP.
Yeah.
And so he knocked her character down. And so Brad Pitt was trying to compensate by being like, you're being a jerk. she just made a simple mistake. Everyone's gonna make a mistake. She's
Right.
just human, so that's not like that was a low thing of you to do. So in order to compensate for that, he turns around and is like, "Hey, don't worry about it. We all do it."
Yeah.
But he also does that publicly.
Yes.
So now she's just the center of attention for everybody. And
Yeah.
so to her, like now all these other teammates are like, "Well, she did lose us a bunch of seconds. She did make that big mistake, and it was a big mistake."
Right.
And so it's like, "Well, why does she get special treatment? Like she's the one that kind of knocked us back."
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about the film is that Javier comes in. I forget the guy's name in the movie, but the actor, he comes in. He's like, he's the I don't know if he's CEO or just a representative, but he comes in with the, "Hey, my company's failing and it's gonna get sold out if we don't get a win here."
Yeah.
So Brad Pitt takes that and he knows like, well, what you guys are doing is not working. So I have to be a rebel in order to do this. So he's got to be loud and he's got
Yeah.
to be obnoxious in order to get everybody to think differently.
Yeah.
And so if that means that he's got to be the punching bag for whatever, then at
Yeah.
least it gets everybody thinking. It gets everybody like thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
And so by doing that though, he's going to step on some toes. And but
Mhm.
he acknowledges when he stepped on those toes. So when she comes up and is like, "Yeah, that was thoughtful of you to do, but it also did put me in the limelight. So now I've got to deal with that." And he's like, "Yeah, you're right. I should have tempered that. I probably shouldn't have said it."
Mhm.
But he acknowledges that. It's not a
Yeah.
fight. He doesn't feel like he has to defend himself. He realizes, oh, that, yeah, that was probably the
Yeah.
wrong method. So it
Mhm.
shows his maturity.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting way of establishing his character as the kind of hothead in the
Yeah.
moment, but also realizing when he has gone too far.
Yeah.
And it was a good way of doing that early in a small way so that you could see it in a larger way later.
Mhm.
But the other way that that happens is that JP, at the end of the movie, he's the one leading the crowd running around the track.
Mhm.
Because at first he's not a team player. He's like the hot shot and everyone's supposed to be backing him up. But then he realizes later, like, oh, I should be the leader here. I shouldn't be like throwing people under the bus when they've made a mistake. I should be leading my team so that we're all working better together.
Yeah.
So it starts with Brad Pitt doing it and then JP realizing what he's doing. And so then he's the leader of the track when Brad Pitt takes the inevitable break.
Yeah.
They separate him. And so JP has to take the lead. He passes the torch essentially.
Mhm.
So that was it was fun ways that they thematically show these things without feeling like they've got to give you too much more.
Yeah.
Like these are all visual cues that'll be in there and you understand them innately without necessarily adding a whole lot more to it because it's
Mhm.
not that deep of a movie. And it's okay that it's not. Obviously, we've done a 42-minute episode on what
Yeah.
this movie brings to the table with just being a summer blockbuster.
Well, the thing is, it's like, I mean, it's decently deep if we're saying this much about it.
Sure. Right. But it doesn't need it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He did it because he could and he was capable of doing so without diminishing any of the other elements of the movie that were more important, which is great.
I think on the home front, as a brand, we need it though.
Sure.
If it comes to us, like when we're
Agreed.
evaluating like a film or any project, we like to see those elements come about because they just enrich the experience so much more than they otherwise would have been.
Sure.
And like even just thinking about, like visual storytelling, like there's that great moment early on where I forget his role exactly, but he's kind of like the strategist, I guess. And he's kind of getting everybody he's like, all right, all these previous races, just erase them, forget about it. We've
Oh, yeah.
lost them all, but who cares? And then he's like, we're gonna look to the future, and then he like steps backwards onto the track and like looks to the track,
Uh-huh.
but then he's looking at Brad Pitt as he's walking down. So like that character is their future,
But he's the past.
but he's
Because
the
he's
past.
the previous driver, the has been, never was, or whatever.
Yeah, so it's just an interesting like visual storytelling moment
Mhm.
that doesn't really call attention to itself, but it's like that is the kind of thing that when you're making a movie, a director can be like, "We'll do it this way, just a little
Yeah.
bit differently," and now it has meaning that helps communicate everything else we're talking about in the film.
Yep.
So just let that go through and don't overthink it that hard,
Right.
It's not like you have to psychoanalyze or, to perform like a deep analysis on that
Right.
scene.
Yeah, you got
But
it.
you'll just get
Yeah.
it and they're like, oh, that's smooth. That just communicates what we're talking about here.
Right.
And helps get you into what this film is all about quicker.
Yeah, and it was a nice way of not holding your hand necessarily, but kind of directing your attention properly.
Yeah.
And the way I say it is that they showed their cards because they literally show their cards in that poker game. Is like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we'll show you what we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
just so you're not like confused at all. And it's not that you would be confused, but it's just nice that acknowledging what's happening narratively and
Mm-hmm.
kind of adding more depth through these themes. So I appreciated that for what it was without necessarily it beating me over the head with it. Because it doesn't. It doesn't
Yeah.
overstay its welcome in any of these themes.
Yeah.
It still gives you plenty of the race. It's not one of those kaiju films where you're not getting the two monsters fighting. Like you get plenty of the monsters fighting while also adding some depth. And
Yeah, we're extracting, the depth out of the intermediate scenes
mhm.
now. And we've only done a fraction of them. There's so many. Like they
Yeah,
just accomplish so much with such a short, simple scene.
because they all are relatively short for the
Yeah.
film's length. It is a 2.5 hour movie, but most of it is devoted to making sure you get plenty of the F1 Formula races.
And those are shot just amazing. They're
Amazing.
so great.
Yep.
Like they have like a camera positioned on every car in every conceivable way,
Yep.
and they do this really cool like shot where it's like you're on the car and it's as it's driving, and then it does this like whoosh, like pan all the
Oh
way
yeah.
over. Those were really cool. It was just like wow, that was
Yeah, it's facing forward, and then it does this like it looks like the camera is physically moving. I imagine it's some kind of 360 camera, so you're just kind of shifting around. So
Mm.
it doesn't move itself, but it has all those views in it.
Oh yeah,
So you get as if you're turning, and then you can see the driver as it pans back, and then you
yeah,
see behind the car.
uh-huh,
And so it's an interesting way of like being engaging and like continuing the motion because I think it's what it's doing is keeping the momentum of the shot, but showing you
oh
both
yeah,
angles without necessarily cutting. So you get to
yes,
like turn around or whatever.
mm-hmm.
Super cool. It feels
Yeah,
like you're in a turret or something. Like,
yeah,
like it's fun. I
yeah,
wonder how much of that because like obviously we don't watch it, but I wonder how much of that actually is a part of Formula One racing now.
hmm.
Because I imagine that those things are all outfitted somehow where you can see something. Because they had these cameras that were pointing into
Oh yeah,
the driver's seat of the car, and you can see them whenever they looked at the car. There's this little like contraption that's pointing in
yeah,
at them. But I imagine that they have one that's like somewhere in the vehicle so you can see the driver as well.
yeah,
But it kind of feels like the Iron Man suit or something. Like, because
yeah.
sometimes they'll show like just his face,
Oh
and they
yeah,
can so you can get his eyes or whatever,
mm-hmm.
and they're trying to express the emotion in the helmet. And so
Mm-hmm.
you've got that kind of like real, almost claustrophobic feeling because they're like locked into that thing. The
Yeah, you're just
shoulder pads are like you're not moving. If you get in some kind of accident and roll or whatever, like you want to make sure you're not leaving that car.
yeah,
And so, but I imagine that feeling is rather constricting. And so they show you all that stuff, and it's really cool.
mm-hmm.
It's pretty fun the way how immersive they get with how many details they give you of what these drivers go through and what they do and how they
Mm-hmm.
do it. Super cool.
And then the reverse shot where it's like point of view. There's a few of those,
Hmm.
especially when it's like flashing back to previous like scenarios or previous races, and then it's like so it's just from their perspective, and that's another one of those just grounding elements where
Right.
so it's like grounded in two ways, right? Like the filmmaking of the movie itself is just okay, shoot it, make it as realistic as possible, keep the CGI down. I mean, I don't know how much they had in there visual effects wise, but I can't imagine very much. It didn't feel like it.
You can't
You
tell.
can't notice.
Yeah.
Everything is just like it's
Seamless.
yeah, it feels like you are there on the track watching it happen. So there's that element, but then that like doubles as like a layer for Pitt's character of like
Mm.
being someone who themselves has just like come to terms with things and is at peace with like himself and the world. And the other thing about that that's cool is it feels like one of those movies where you can just tell that people involved were enjoying themselves.
Yes.
And that
Brad
was
Pitt, namely.
yeah, him for sure. Yeah, he even said in an interview, he said that when they started filming for a while, he had to do a lot of takes, and they were like, "Pitt, you have to stop smiling." Because
He's
like
having
we
so
can
much
see
fun.
you. It's like having too much fun. Like you gotta. He's
That's
like,
awesome.
oh yeah. He's like,
What a good problem to
He's
have.
like, I have to remember that I gotta act. I gotta be serious.
That's so cool. I'm jealous.
Yeah, I know for real. But those things, like, or even like when the characters, like all the side characters, and they're on like the jog or whatever, something about it, I was like, man, that it comes through that sincerity. It's so fascinating to me that in the artistic practice, that when people are like really in tune with themselves or really like happy and interested in what they're doing, it
Mhm.
just like seeps through and you just sense it.
Sure.
And like there's so many like we rail on like the production stuff that's just corporatized, right? And it's
Yeah.
like you're doing something for
Feels so
corporate,
soulless.
right? And then
Yeah.
it feels that way. I mean,
Yeah.
or look at like the Shyamalan movies. It's like they feel like they're just one man's thoughts,
Right.
and that no one else has any contribution to it.
It's a vision that no one else is contributing to.
Right.
It's
and
just
so
like
everyone's
this is just
trying,
a job at this point.
Yeah, but it just becomes a job, and then it's like it doesn't feel good,
Yeah.
Shyamalan. And you're just by having so much control, you constrain
Yeah.
what could be. And yeah, this was just a movie that was the total antithesis of that. Just very genuine, really good film.
Yeah. And I think we'll end with where we started. Go see it. Definitely go see it. Thanks for
In
watching.
IMAX.
Yeah, in IMAX for sure. So you made it to the end of the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear what you thought.